Hi everyone. It wasn't during an argument. There was no shouting, no accusations thrown across the room. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you realize something is about to change, and not in a way you'd ever want it. We were in the kitchen. She was standing by the sink, rinsing a plate, her voice calm, deliberate. "You're nothing more than a co-parent to me, not my real match." I wish I could say I didn't hear her, that the words didn't register at first. But I heard them clearly. There was no room for misinterpretation, no hint of regret or hesitation in her tone. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a statement, a decision, one she had likely made long before saying it out loud. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the back of her head as she continued washing the plate, like she had just informed me about the weather. There was no anger in her voice. No sadness. Just a detachment. I swallowed hard, but my throat was dry. "So that's how you see me?" My own voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. She didn't turn around. I think we both know this hasn't been a real marriage for a long time. There it was again. That calm, factual tone. As if she were talking about a mutual agreement. But this wasn't mutual. This wasn't something I had accepted, let alone acknowledged. I took a step closer, my hands resting on the edge of the counter. "And when did you decide this?" This time, she finally turned to face me, drying her hands with a towel, her expression unreadable. "It's been obvious, hasn't it? We're good parents, but that's all we are. We don't connect like we should. We don't challenge or inspire each other. I think we both deserve something more than just this arrangement." Her words carried a finality that settled in my stomach like a weight. The worst part? She truly believed what she was saying. She had convinced herself that this was just some logical conclusion. That whatever we had built over the years had been reduced to nothing more than a functional parenting partnership. I let out a slow breath, gripping the counter. "So that's it? That's how you see me? Just the father of your children and nothing else?" She shrugged. "I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't want to pretend anymore." Pretend? The realization hit harder than I expected. All the moments we had shared, the late-night talks, the vacations, the quiet mornings drinking coffee together, had they all been an act to her? Had she been going through the motions, waiting for the right moment to let me know I was nothing more than an obligation in her life? I wanted to argue, to make her see how wrong she was. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way she stood there, completely sure of herself. Maybe it was the way she had spoken, as if this was just a casual conversation about something trivial. There was no remorse, no guilt, no sign that this decision had cost her anything at all. The air in the room felt thick, pressing down on me, but I refused to let her see how deep the knife had gone. "Good to know," I finally said, my voice steady. "At least now we're being honest." Something flickered across her face. Surprised, maybe? As if she had expected resistance, a desperate plea to change her mind. But that wasn't going to happen. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my mind already shifting. If this was how she saw me, then I would make sure she felt the same. I walked out of the kitchen without looking back, but my mind wasn't quiet. Her words kept repeating in my head like a broken record, refusing to fade into the background. "You're nothing more than a co-parent to me." That wasn't something she had just realized in the moment. No, this had been sitting inside her for a long time, maybe months, maybe years. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't some sudden epiphany for her. This was just the first time she had decided to say it out loud. And that made me wonder, how long had I been blind to it? That night I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, rewinding every interaction we had over the past few years, searching for the signs that should have warned me. And they were there, clear as day. I thought back to how she used to be, the way she'd light up when I walked into a room, the way she'd randomly send me texts during the day, little things, inside jokes, things that made her laugh, songs she heard that reminded her of me. At some point that stopped. I couldn't even remember the last time she had reached out first. When had I become someone she only talked to, though, when she had to? The way she used to touch me had changed too. It was subtle, but I could see it now. Before there had been warmth, a hand on my arm in passing, a knee resting against mine under the dinner table, Kisses that weren't just routine. Lately, nothing. Her hugs felt more like habit than affection. The way she kissed me, when she even bothered, was just muscle memory. And when was the last time she had looked at me with any kind of admiration, any kind of desire? I thought back to conversations we'd had, or the ones we hadn't had. She used to ask me about my day, really ask, not just in the automatic, polite way people do, but in a way that made me feel like she actually cared. At some point that had stopped too. She still asked, but it was different now, forced, empty. And when I tried to share things with her, things I was excited about, she'd nod along distractedly, waiting for me to finish rather than actually engaging. Then there were the moments when I'd catch her really smiling, genuine, effortless smiles. Lately, those smiles weren't for me. They were for her friends, for people she met at work, for anyone except the man she had once promised to love. Had I noticed all of this before? But I had ignored it. I had told myself she was just stressed, tired, busy with life. I had made excuses for why the woman I married felt so distant. Because the alternative, accepting that she just didn't feel the same way about me anymore, was too painful to face. But now I couldn't ignore it anymore. Everything clicked into place. She hadn't fallen out of love overnight. She had just stopped seeing me as someone who mattered beyond our kids. I was a necessity, a functional part of her life, not a partner. And the truth? She had been showing me that for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. If she saw me as nothing more than a co-parent, then that's exactly what I would be. Nothing more. Nothing less. No arguments. No emotional pleas. No attempts to fix something that was clearly already broken. I wouldn't waste my energy trying to prove my worth to someone who had already decided I was insignificant. That morning I got up before she did. I made breakfast for the kids, packed their lunches, and got them ready for the day without saying much. She came downstairs, still in her robe, and gave me a quick glance before pouring herself a cup of coffee. Usually I'd at least try to make conversation, ask her if she slept well, comment on the day ahead. This time I didn't bother. I didn't even acknowledge her, and she noticed. It was subtle at first. She glanced at me a few times, like she was expecting something. Maybe she thought I was upset that I was silently brooding. But I wasn't. I was just done. I dropped the kids off at school and went about my day like normal, but everything I did was with a new mindset. I wasn't her husband anymore, not in the way she wanted me to be. I was her co-parent. That's it. That night when she got home from work, I was already helping the kids with their homework. She came in, tossed her bag on the chair, and sighed like she expected me to ask about her day. I didn't. Instead I stood up, told the kids I'd be in my office if they needed me, and left the room. She hesitated for a second, like she was waiting for me to say something. But I didn't, and that was the beginning of it. No more initiating conversations unless they were about the kids. No more texts during the day to check in. No more small talk. No more favors. For years I had given her everything, attention, effort, care, while she slowly detached herself. Now she would know what it felt like to be on the other side of that. Dinner time? Strictly about the kids. I listened to them, engaged with them, laughed with them. But not her. If she spoke directly to me, I answered politely but nothing more. Weekends? I made my own plans. If she wanted to do something as a family, fine. But I wouldn't be the one to suggest it. I wouldn't chase her attention anymore. At first she didn't react much. Maybe she thought I was just adjusting to the new dynamic. Maybe she believed I was still processing what she had said. But then she started noticing the difference. It was in the way I no longer looked at her the way I used to. The way I didn't go out of my way to make her life easier like I always had. The way I didn't ask for her opinion or seek out her presence. She expected indifference to come from her side. She had spent so much time emotionally checking out of our marriage that she assumed she held all the control. Now she was the one feeling it. At first she pretended not to care. Maybe she even thought she had won. After all, this was what she claimed she wanted. A clean-cut, no strings attached, purely functional co-parenting relationship. So I gave her exactly that. No small talk, no interest in her life outside of the things that directly involved the kids. I didn't check in to see how her day went. I didn't ask if she needed anything when I ran errands. I didn't notice when she got a haircut. And I certainly didn't compliment her when she put in effort to look good. I stopped being available. The first time she really noticed was on a Saturday. We used to spend weekends together as a family, even if it was just doing simple things. Grocery shopping, taking the kids to the park, watching a movie at home. But this time I made other plans. I took the kids out early in the morning without mentioning it to her. When she came downstairs, I was already gone. She texted me, asking where we were. I waited nearly an hour before responding with a short, "Out with the kids, be back later." No explanation, no apology, no invitation for her to join us. When we got home in the afternoon, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, but she wasn't really looking at it. The moment we walked in, her eyes went straight to me. "Where'd you go?" she asked, her voice casual. But the question itself told me everything I needed to know. "Out," I said, setting down the car keys. Kids wanted to do something, so we went. Her lips pressed together, and she nodded slowly. "Would have been nice to know." I shrugged, didn't think it mattered. That was the first crack. The second came during dinner a few days later. The kids were talking about their day, laughing, telling me all the details about their friends at school. I was fully engaged, asking them questions, joking with them. She was sitting right there, but I didn't acknowledge her. She tried to chime in at one point, making a comment about something one of them said, but I didn't respond. Not in a rude way, just in the way she had been treating me for months, maybe years. Like her words held no weight. For the first time in a long time, she looked uncomfortable. She started testing me after that. She'd bring up things from work just to see if I would bite. I didn't. She tried mentioning something funny that had happened to her that day. I nodded but didn't ask for details. Then one night she came home looking irritated. I was in the living room reading, and she stood there for a few seconds like she was waiting for me to acknowledge her. "You've been acting weird," she finally said. I glanced up. "How?" She hesitated like she hadn't actually planned out what to say. "I don't know, just different." I closed my book. "I thought this is what you wanted." She blinked. "What?" "You said we're just co-parents," I reminded her, my tone neutral. "So that's what I'm doing. Parenting. Everything else is irrelevant, right?" She stared at me, and for the first time since this started, she looked unsure. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but then stopped, and that was all the confirmation I needed. She hadn't expected this. She had expected me to beg for her affection, to hold on, to keep trying. She had expected control. Instead, I had given her exactly what she asked for. And now, she was the one who didn't know how to handle it. After that night, something changed. She started paying closer attention, watching me, listening more, trying to read between the lines of my silence. At first, she didn't know how to respond. It was obvious in the little things, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way she'd glance at me like she wanted to say something but held back. She was waiting for me to crack, to break the routine I had set. But I didn't. Instead, I continued as I had been, focused on the kids, detached from her, absent in the way she had been absent for so long, and it was driving her insane. She started trying, but not in a way that was obvious. It was small at first. One night, she asked if I wanted her to pick up something from the store. I told her I'd already taken care of it. Another night, she made a comment about a show we used to watch together, as if testing whether I'd take the bait and start a conversation. I didn't. Then she got more direct. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I was in the kitchen cleaning up. She walked in and leaned against the counter, watching me. "You really don't care, do you?" she asked. I placed the last dish in the rack and turned to face her. "About what?" She let out a frustrated breath. "About any of this. About us." I studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "There is no us." Her jaw tightened. "So that's just it? You're fine with things being like this?" I dried my hands with a towel and met her gaze. "No, but I've accepted it. You made it clear how you see me. I'm just doing the same." She looked away for a second, then back at me. "That's not what I meant when I said that." I almost laughed. "Isn't it?" She pressed her lips together like she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. She knew. She knew she had been the one to kill whatever we had. She had convinced herself for so long that I was just there. Just existing. just playing a role in her life that didn't really matter. And now that I had stopped trying, now that I had removed myself emotionally, she was realizing what that actually meant. She had expected me to chase her, to fight for a place in her life she had already written me out of. But when I didn't, she was the one feeling the distance. And the truth was, I had nothing left to give. She had drained me for so long, taken everything I had without even realizing it, and now that I had finally stopped pouring myself into a relationship that wasn't even real anymore, she was the one who felt empty. I picked up my phone and walked past her without another word. For the first time, she was the one left standing alone. She wanted to talk. That much was clear. The problem was I had nothing left to say. The signs had been there for weeks. The way she watched me differently. The way she hesitated before speaking. Like she was second-guessing everything. She wasn't used to this version of me. The man who didn't chase her. The man who no longer needed her approval. But I was done waiting for her to figure things out. One night after the kids were asleep, I sat across from her at the kitchen table. I didn't need a dramatic setup. No emotional speeches. Just clarity. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up from her phone, surprised, maybe even hopeful. "Yeah, I want a divorce." I had expected a reaction. Maybe anger. Maybe immediate resistance. But what I got was something else entirely. Silence. She just sat there, staring at me. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head, trying to process what I had just said. She had spent so long being the one in control. The one who got to decide what we were, what we weren't. And now that control was gone. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than I expected. "Are you serious?" I nodded. Completely. She swallowed, looking away for a moment. "But..." That almost made me laugh. "But... after everything?" "Because I finally see it," I said. "You checked out of this marriage a long time ago, and I should have followed you out the door when you did." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "I never wanted this." I leaned back. "Didn't you?" She shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. "I just wanted us to be honest about what we were. I never said I wanted to end it." I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "You didn't have to say it. You showed me every single day the way you treated me, the way you looked at me like I was just an obligation, like I was some background character in your life." Her jaw clenched. She wanted to argue, to say it wasn't true. But she couldn't because we both knew it was. I didn't need to convince her. I wasn't there to make her see my worth. I had already wasted enough time trying to prove myself to someone who had already made up her mind about me. She finally whispered, "What about the kids?" That was the only thing that mattered. "We figure it out. We co-parent. Just like you wanted." She looked like she wanted to say something else, but for the first time, she was the one who didn't have the words. I stood up. "I'll start looking for a place tomorrow." And that was it. No fight. No dramatic, tearful goodbye. Just the end. As I walked away from the table, I realized something. I wasn't leaving because I was broken. I was leaving because I was finally whole again. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.